Good day, everyone. Our lesson for today is all about Module 5, Administering, Analyzing, and Improving Tests. This particular topic is in connection with your previous module, which is the development of a different type of tests. Supposedly, when if actually if the time permitted us, no, supposedly yung mga materials na ginawa ninyo, dapat sana pinasagutan natin yan. Of course, I do have to check on that first before natin pasagutan sa kahit sino. And then their responses, of course, you have to check their responses. And then those responses and then their scores, gagamitin natin yan for this lesson sana. No? But then again, because of the limited or we have time constraint and we all have this pandemic, we will jump off without doing that one, no, of course. But then again, one of the important thing of being a teacher, of course, is to interpret now the results of the exam or the materials that you actually made, no, because that is actually very important because these particular results are feedback, no? Kumbaga, ito yung tinatawag natin na feedback for the teachers to be informed kung ano yung quality, ano yung flow, ano yung na intindihan ng mga estudyante during the lesson or during those lessons. So we'll be discussing how to administer and of course analyze and improve our tests. Okay, but before that, let me introduce to you the learning outcomes of this lesson. At the end of this chapter, you should be able to define the basic concepts regarding item analysis, identify the steps in improving test items, solve difficulty index and discrimination index. We will be I will be giving you thorough discussion on difficulty index and discrimination index because these are the keys of your item analysis, as we say. Number 4, identify the level of difficulty of an item. Number 5, perform item analysis properly and correctly. Number 6, identify the item to be rejected, revised, and retained, because these are actually the process of improving your test. No, if that particular item will be rejected, do we have to revise it or to retain the item? And how to know if we are to reject, revise, or retain the item? Of course, we have to understand first the concept of difficulty index and discrimination index. And the last learning outcome would be interpret the results of item analysis. One of the most important functions of a teacher is to assess the performance of the students. This is a very complicated task because you will consider many activities such as the timing of the assessment process, the format of the assessment tools, and the duration of the assessment procedures. After designing the assessment tools, which you actually had done during the previous module, package the test, administer the test to the students, check the test papers, score and then record them. Return the test papers and then give feedback to the students regarding the results of the test. I told you that uh, uh, part of checking, right after checking the results of that material, that is actually considered to be the feedback, no? Not just actually for the students but also to the teachers, because whatever the performance of the students, it could actually be reflected to the performance of the teacher. The teacher normally prepares a draft of the test. So that is actually the very basic one. No? Siguro, for example, kung meron man tayong first grading period na exam, no? First grading period, malayo pa lang kasi alam na ni teacher kasi yung coverage ng first periodical exam. So, of course, since alam na ni teacher yung coverage ng first periodical exam, probably gagawa rin na si teacher ng draft of the test. No? Siguro, he or she will make test siguro for this day 5 or somewhat like that. The draft is subjected to item analysis and validation to be useful and functional. Okay, so we have here actually three phases. In the first one, tryout phase, the draft test will be tried out to a group of students of similar characteristics to the test takers. Bali, itong phases na I'll be mentioning. At some point, if you are to look at the descriptions of these phases, these are the phases when you are to have your thesis, no? So like for example, if meron kang test questionnaire, and then your advisor and then your panelists could give you an advice to pilot test your material. This is actually the part, no? The tryout phase, the item analysis, and of course the item revision phase. So ang una, gagawa si teacher ng test, no? If we are to do this in a very technical way, si teacher gagawa muna siya ng test. Right after that, ita-try out ng teacher. No? Some of which they term it as pilot testing. Okay, so the draft test will be tried out to a group of students of similar characteristics to the test takers. Like for example, itong exam na ito ay para lang sa um, siguro PsyCore, or for example, sa section 1 ng second year. And then yung test mo, pina-exam mo yung section 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So the same characteristics, bakit sinabi natin we assume that they have the same characteristics? It is because the same level sila, the same group of age, the same mental capacity or mental capability and so on. Okay? The next one, right after the pilot testing, you have to collect the test. You have to analyze the items, how they answered each item. And we call it item analysis phase. So each item will be analyzed in terms of its ability to discriminate and also its level of difficulty. So our purpose here is to know if that item is suitable or appropriate or yeah, correct one. No, because technically, if we're going to create an exam, especially for the multiple choice test, that is not actually very easy. No, we really have to consider how you construct the test item, how you choose words when it comes to your options or your choices. Okay, and then right after that, right after doing the item analysis stage, you have now to revise your test items if meron mang kailangang revisions and so on. So item revision phase allow the teacher to decide whether to revise or replace an item. I hope that is clear. The final draft of the test is subjected to validation if the intent is to make use of the test as a standard test for the particular unit or grading period. So alam na natin if right after getting now the final draft of your test, you can actually validate that if the purpose of the test is to become or the purpose of that test is to become a standardized test. Okay, so you have to validate it. How to validate it? Of course, you have uh, to subject it to different types of validation. You have actually face validation, content validation, and so on. Okay. Packaging and reproducing items. Assuming that you have already assembled the test, you write the instructional objectives, prepare the table of specification, and write the test items that match with the instructional objectives. The next thing to do is to package the test, yes, and reproduce it as discussed in the previous chapter. So what are now the steps in packaging and reproducing the test? Number one, put the items with the same format together. I think I did already mention this one. No? Lahat ng the same format na test item, dapat nasa isang part lang siya. Like for example, kung meron siyang multiple choices, so doon siya ilagay sa multiple choice na part. Kung identification man siya and so on. I hope you get it. Number two, arrange the test items from easy to difficult. You should not discourage your students in taking the quiz. Therefore, them to give them self-confidence, not to minimize discouraging them in taking the quiz or exam, you should create number one of your test item should be easy. No, number two easier, number three easiest. No? So that's actually the arrangement. So dapat easy ko na siya na napita and then pataas na dahil ang level of difficulty. You number one should not be asked compute this blah blah blah. Because number one pa lang daan na discouraging yung estudyante kasi nga item number one is very difficult. So ano pa yung nakasunod na questions? So more difficult, correct? So that is why we do away discouraging our students in taking the quiz or exam. So we really have to give them this confidence that, oh, okay, the exam is very easy. So you can actually ask number one, two, and three very easy questions. Number three, give proper spacing for each item for easy reading. This is the very technical way of doing it. No, you really have to create spacing for each item para yung pagbabasa ng estudyante hindi naman siya mag-mix. No, because at some point, if they are very anxious in answering the exam, there are times that mamimix yung mga words, no, and they cannot focus on it. So we really have to give a proper spacing for each item. The next one is keep questions and options in the same page. This is also very technical. Make sure that uh, the contents of that particular item is in the same page. So for example, questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Meron kang question number 9. Yung question nasa first page, and then yung A, B nasa first page pa din, at saka yung C, D nasa likod na or the other page, and that is very wrong. When I say very wrong, because I am talking about technicalities here, therefore we are to consider that as a wrong way of packaging your exam. So again, keep questions and options in the same page. Next, place the illustrations near the options, especially for those elementary teachers here. If you have your illustrations or diagram, do not please make sure kasi nga yung ibang teachers because of ano ba yan, merong problema sa pera. So, ginagawa talaga nila is sinisiksik nila lahat. But then again, you really have to make sure that the question or the illustration intended for that item ay hindi siya malayo, no, for that particular item. No? Dapat pag sinabing, please observe the illustration below, dapat nakikita talaga siya below. Hindi dapat siya nakikita at somewhere else. Check the key answer. Yes, you really have to check the key answer because later on magkakaproblema tayo. And we will actually check on that, no, because siguro we are to notice na anong daghay wrong, no? For example, bakit ang liit ng mga scores sa mga estudyante, even the 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 ano ba, the fast learners sa klase, meron silang wrong items. Probably yung key answer mo yung merong problema. So you have to check your key answer and of course your point system. Next, check the direction of the test. This is very important. No, as I am saying, our direction or our instructions should be short and concise, very clear. We don't have to use very complicated terms, very technical words when we are to write our direction or instruction. We just have to use simple words for, of course, for the students to understand quickly the instruction. Kasi nga, marami pa silang dapat sagutan. No? Therefore, you really have to create instruction which is very clear, very concise, very simple, and so on, and very understandable. But just to make sure, if that particular item is very, very technical to answer, you really have to give all the necessary direction. No? The next one, provide space for name, date, and score. Yes. And proofread the test. Yes, especially for grammar technicals. No. And then reproduce the test. So those are the packaging and then reproducing your test items. The next part would be okay. The next part would be the administration of the exam. After the construction of the test items and putting them in order, the next step is to administer the test to the student. So this is now the part we're in. Meron tayong mga techniques on how to give our test paper, no? Yung very common instruction, okay, do not ano ba yan? Do not open yet the test paper. Dapat magdungan daw, somewhat like that, no? The administration procedures greatly affect the performance of the students in the test, and that is really true. Really true. The test administration does not simply mean giving the test questions to the students and collecting the test papers after the given time. Below are the guidelines in administering the test before, during, and after the test. So let's try to look at now, uh, yes, let's try to look at now the guidelines before administering examinations. The first one is to try to induce positive test taking attitude. No, you as a proctor as a teacher who will give the exam, hindi natin pwedeng bigyan ng strict face yung mga estudyante natin because very detrimental na very anxious na sila in taking the exam. Therefore, you really have to give positive vibe inside the classroom. The atmosphere should not be polluted. The atmosphere should not be polluted with the negative vibes that are coming from you, no? Dapat talaga positive because it could actually boost their confidence in taking the exam. Number two, inform the students about the purpose of the test. Meron tayong mga pachika, no? Just make sure if you're going to do this, dapat talaga alam natin yung time natin because especially in our basic education, we only have 60 minutes or 45 minutes to give them, no? And in answering the test. So make it short, no? Number three, give oral directions as early as possible before distributing the test. All of the directions necessary for taking the exam, it should be done before administering examinations. Number four, give test taking hints about guessing, skipping, and the like are strictly prohibited, yes. And then inform the students about the length of time allowed for the test. We really have to inform them. And it is very nice if you are to write it on the board in which they must be finished with answering the test and then give the students a warning before the end of the time limit. So, mas na, very good talaga siya, although very, siguro yung iba, ito yung pinapractice ko kasi every time I'm having my exam no in sa face to face, I have to do talaga na meron talaga akong pa-timer on screen. It may add it may add the feeling of anxiety in taking the exam, but it could give perhaps them idea on how to limit their responses, no, to limit their actions, not to focus on this item and then jump off to that, and then they have to go back to the skipped item, somewhat like that. So, meaning to say, if you are to project time here, parang tinuturuan natin yung mga estudyante to limit their responses. Meaning to say, the bottom line of my statement is actually time management. No, makikita kasi nila yan. Okay. Next one is tell the students how to signal or call your attention if they have a question. So of course, hindi natin gusto na by the time merong concern yung estudyante natin, hindi pwedeng, may question pa ko because it could distract the others. So perhaps you could give them a signal or call na medyo very silent. Siguro dapat taas lang ang kamot siguro sa estudyante or mo-approach siguro. I don't know kung ano yung dapat na strategy na gusto mo. Number seven, tell the students what to do with their papers when they are done answering the test. Kung i-collect mo ba, kasi yung ibang strategy, no, i-collect ba siya or hindi. So it should be part of your instruction. Tell the students if they are tell the students what to do when they are done with the test, particularly if they are to go on to another activity. This particular lines, they are very appropriate to mga entrance exam, no? Kasi yun sa mga entrance exam, meron kasing iba't ibang parts, di ba? You have to finish this one for at some time, and then next part naman of the exam, somewhat like that. Okay, and the number nine, rotate the method of distributing papers. You didn't always start from the left or the front row. Okay, let's just run through. Number 10, make sure the room is well lighted and has a comfortable temperature. This is very important, no? Kasi nga, uh, kapoy na kay magbasa ng exam, hindi pa jud klaro. So anyway, and then hindi pwedeng napakainit, hindi din pwedeng napakalamig because it could distract them, no? 11 reminds students to put their names on their papers. Yes, yung pinakauna. Kaya nga yung parati natin sinasabi yung elementary teachers natin, okay, write, do not forget to write your name. Naging siya kasi yung iba nakakalimutan, no? Nag-jump off na agad sa iba't ibang questions. Number 12, the last one. If the test has more than one page, have each student check to see that all pages are there. So, apil kasali na yan sa mga instructions mo that siguro the last part of my instruction would be kindly check if meron tayong ano ba yan? Two pages, no, back to back, something like that. No? Okay. The next one would be the guidelines during the examination. Let's just run through the guidelines during the examination. Do not give instructions or avoid talking while the examination is going on to minimize interruptions and distractions. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, lahat ng instructions for the exam, it should be done before the examination. Lahat ng importanting mga directions or instruction, it should be given prior to the examination. Okay? Number 2, avoid giving hints. Number 3, monitor to check student progress and discourage cheating. Give time warnings if students are pacing their work appropriately. Make a note of any questions students ask during the test so that items can be revised for future use. This is very important. No? Number 6, test papers must be collected uniformly to save time and to avoid test papers to be misplaced. Mas maganda na yung collection of paper is ano ba yan, uniform, no? Hindi siya random. Okay. The next one would be the guidelines after the examination. After the examination, the next activity that the teacher needs to do is to score the test papers, record the result of the examination, return the test papers, and last to discuss the test items in the class so that you can analyze and improve the test items for future use. So we have here the guidelines after the examination. Let's just run through. Grade the papers and add comments if you can. Ito yung napakaganda na because we can actually give comments that could give also an idea to the students na ito pala yung mistake ng estudyante, very specific mistake, no? Do test analysis after scoring and before returning papers to students if at all possible. If it is impossible to do your test analysis before returning the papers, be sure to do it another time because that could actually improve your test. No, that's actually one of the main purposes of your item analysis to improve your test. It is important to do both the evaluation of your students and the improvement of your tests. Number Number 2, if you are recording grades or scores, record them in pencil in your class record before returning the papers para naman if there would be errors or adjustments, may erase lang natin. Okay? Number 3, return papers in a timely manner. This is actually one of the challenging act of the teachers to return papers immediately. And of course, this number 3 is very important when it comes to basic education. I'm not telling you that this is not important at tertiary level in our level. This is also important, but then again, this is much more important in the basic education because we all know that they really needed proper feedback because that is basic education, that is the foundation of education. So teachers must give proper and immediate feedback. Number 4, I think the last part, no, discuss the test items with the students. We call it rationalization, no? Para alam ng estudyante, ito pala yung mali ko. Sir, bakit po mali ang sagot ko? Bakit po yan po yung tama? We call it rationalization. We rationalize the test items, no? Bakit yan at saka ito? If students have questions, agree to look over their papers again, as well as the papers of others who have the same question. It is usually better not to agree to make changes in grades on the spur of the moment while discussing the tests with the students, but to give yourself time to consider what action you want to take. The test analysis may have already alerted you to a problem with a particular question that is common to several students, and you may already have made a decision regarding that question. Kasi nga, although our purpose in discussing the test items to your students is for them to ask and to ask clarifications, but that is why we really have, as a teacher, by the time we are to rationalize our tests, no, dapat alam talaga ni teacher yung tamang sagot, no? Alam ni teacher yung how to justify, how to debate with that particular answer siguro. Okay. The next part of the lesson is the analyzing test, no, or an analysis of your test. After administering and scoring the test, the teacher should also analyze the quality of each item in the test. Through this, you can identify the item that is good item, no? Pwede. Identify the item that is good, item that needs improvement, or items to be removed from the test. And this is very important. But when do we consider that the test is good? And how do we evaluate the quality of each item in the test? The other one, why is it necessary to evaluate each item in the test? According to Lewis Eichen, 1987, an author of Psychological Educational Measurement, pointed out that a post-mortem, we call it post-mortem in the medical field, meron din silang term na post-mortem. In our educational measurement, we also have the term post-mortem, quote unquote, is just as necessary in classroom assessment as it is in medicine. Yes, no? Meron din tayong parang analogy of it, post-mortem. Meaning to say, pag namatay yung pasyente or if a person namatay, kailangan talaga natin malaman kung ano yung cause of death, no? How to know the cause of death of that person, kailangan natin siya undergo for, ano ba? Anong type of analysis? Yes, we have to autopsy. Kailangan mag-undergo autopsy yung particular person. Kaya nga during the case of the killing of or the death of Dacera, yes, the autopsy is very crucial for us to for them to know what is really what is actually the story behind the death of Dacera. Okay, the flight attendant. This is also important when it comes to classroom assessment because although natapos na ng estudyante, nasagutan na yung test paper, ano ba yung tinatawag na postmortem, no? Dito natin malalaman, actually this is now the part of analyzing not just the performance of the students, but the quality also of the test. Okay. So this is now the argument of Lewis Eichen. Okay. In this section, we shall introduce the technique to help teachers determine the quality of a test item known as item analysis. One of the purposes of item analysis is to improve the quality of the assessment tools. That is really the one of the main purposes. This is actually I did mention about this. Through this process, we can identify the item that is to be retained, revised, or rejected, and the content of the lesson that is mastered or not. So this is very important talaga, no? There are two kinds of item analysis. We have quantitative item analysis and that is the first one is quantitative item analysis and the second one is qualitative item analysis. This is based on Gubizin and Borage 2007. Okay, so we'll now go to item analysis part. According to definition, item analysis is a process of examining the student's response to individual item in the test, no? Tinitingnan dito yung pagsagot ng estudyante for that particular item. Why do we have to check on that? Because dito natin malalaman if the test is well written, if really yung estudyante nag-aaral ba talaga or wala. Dito natin malalaman. Through the use of item analysis, we can identify which of the given are good and defective test items. Again, why do I are doing this? Because we really needed to improve our test. Good items are to be retained and defective items are to be improved, to be revised, or to be rejected. Katong ma-reject na gyud nga test item, pati na gyud kayo ang iyang construction sa item. Use of item analysis. Number one, item analysis data provide a basis for efficient class discussion of the test results. Item analysis data provide a basis for remedial work because this is now the time that you can actually get specific feedback coming from how the students answer your test. Item analysis data provide a basis for general improvement of classroom instruction. Number five, item analysis procedures provide a basis for constructing a test bank. Now let's proceed to the what you call this, the types of quantitative and item analysis. Okay. There are three common types of quantitative item analysis, which provide teachers with three different types of information about individual test items. These are difficulty index, discrimination index, and response options analysis. So we'll be having first difficulty index. It refers to the proportion of the number of students in the upper and lower groups who answered an item correctly. We will know later kung anong ibig sabihin ng upper and lower groups, no, of a class. So again, when we say difficulty index, it refers to the proportion of the number of students in the upper and then lower groups who answered the item correctly. For number one, no, for example, for number one, the correct answer is letter A. So let's try to look at kung sino yung sumagot ng letter A coming from the upper group and then lower group of the class. So the larger the proportion, the more students who have learned the subject is measured by the item. So to compute the difficulty index of an item, we have to use the formula D sub F is equal to small letter n divided by n, where df or d sub f is equal to difficulty of index. Small letter n here is the number of the students selecting item correctly in the upper group and in the lower group. Since we are to identify the number of students who select the item correctly sa upper at saka lower, therefore i-add natin. Okay? Capital letter N, total number of students who answered the test. So small letter n, kung sino yun or ilan yung number of students who answered correctly sa upper at saka lower. Yung capital letter naman is ang total number of students who took the test. Okay. Now let's try to look at the interpretations when it comes to the level of difficulty. So meron tayong table dyan. We have two columns in a table, index range, also have here difficulty level. We call it the level of difficulty of an item. We have 0 to 0 to 0 0.20, very difficult, 0.21 to 0.40, difficult, 0.41 to 0.60, average or moderately difficult, 0.61 to 0.80, that is an easy item, 0.81 to 1, very easy. So let's try to look at now the difficulty level, and because of that difficulty level, you can actually adjust our test item, no? To determine the level of difficulty of an item, find first the difficulty index uh, with the use of that formula, no? D sub F is equal to a small letter n divided by n. Using the formula and identify the level of difficulty using the range given below. Meaning to say, if you are to interpret now the result of your level of difficulty, uh, we have to use this particular table. So the higher the value of the index of difficulty, the easier the item is. So makikita naman siguro sa index range, no? Hence, more students got the correct answer. Of course, kung if the index of difficulty is 0.90, meaning to say that is actually a very easy test item. Now, bakit sinabing very easy na test item? Because in the upper at saka lower group, may nakakuha ng tamang sagot. No? And then marami sila. Next would be the concept of discrimination index. Kanina ang gusto nating malaman kung ilan yung nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper at saka lower and then divided by the total number of students who took the test. Now, very different naman sa tinatawag nating discrimination index. The power of the item to discriminate the students between those who scored high and those who scored low in the overall test. Dito naman, kaya tinawag siyang discrimination index, it is because yung purpose of this particular type of quantitative item analysis is to give a total discrimination between two groups, no? Yung upper at saka lower. So napaka crucial ng part na ito because we really have to look at the value of the upper and lower, no? Kasi nga based on that, we can identify if we are to modify or anything, no? Kung ano man yung gagawin natin sa ating test item. Next, it is the power of the item to discriminate the students who know the lesson and those who do not know the lesson. Technically, our assumption here is that for those nandun sa upper group, tinatawag natin sila na alam talaga nila yung particular lesson because they answered the item correctly. Next, it also refers to the number of students in the upper group who got an item correctly. Again, it also refers to the number of students in the upper group who got an item correctly minus the number of students in the lower group who got an item correctly. So meaning to say, when we say discrimination index, kasi nga gusto nating malaman total discrimination between the upper at saka lower, what kung ilan yung nakasagot ng kung ilang estudyante nakasagot sa upper group, minus natin yan sa estudyante na nakasagot sa lower group. And then divide the difference by either the number of the students in the upper group or number of students in the lower group or get the higher number if they are not equal. So anyway, titingnan natin to, we can actually understand the third bullet by the time I'll be showing you the sample or some examples. So it is the basis of measuring the validity of an item. Okay. It can be interpreted as an indication of the extent to which overall knowledge of the content area or mastery of the skills is related to the response of an item. So dito natin malaman because it is very important kasi if we are to look at kung yung mga estudyante they mastered really the content of the exam, dito natin malalaman. Okay, so we have here the different types of discrimination. There are three kinds of discrimination index. We have positive discrimination, negative discrimination, and the third one is the zero discrimination. So when we say positive discrimination, it happens when more students in the upper group got the item correctly than those students in the lower group, because this is actually the normal one, no? Our assumption here should be the upper group of the class, not the upper group, mean to say yung matalino na grupo, no? Because yung upper at saka lower group kasi it will be computed, no? So hindi yung sinasabi natin na upper yung top 5 or top 10 sa klase, yung lower yun yung yung kulelat, no? Hindi. To identify the upper and the lower group, we have to compute that later. Number two, negative discrimination occurs when more students in the lower group got the item correctly than those students in the upper. This is the opposite of the positive discrimination. Sa positive discrimination, mas marami ang nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper group kumpara sa lower group. Sa negative discrimination naman, mas marami nakakuha ng correct answer sa lower group kumpara sa upper group. Now, when it comes to zero discrimination, it happens when a number of students in the upper group and lower group who answer the test correctly are equal. So hence, the test item cannot distinguish the students who perform in the overall test and the students whose performance are very poor. So again, sa zero discrimination, equal. No, hindi natin malalaman if really the item is very poor when it comes to construction or whatsoever, because yung nakakuha ng tamang sagot kay equal sa lower at saka upper group. So those are the three types of discrimination index. Okay. Next, okay, we have here our table on level of discrimination by Ebel and Fresby, 1986, as cited by Hetzel, 1987, recommended the use of level of discrimination of an item for easier interpretation. This one is the same with the level of difficulty. We also have here our interpretation based on the value right after computation. We also have here two columns. The first one is the index range. The second one is the discrimination level, which is the interpretation of the index range. If right after computation, if you got 0.19 and below, the item is is poor, should be eliminated, or need to be revised. Okay, and then 0.20 to 0.29 marginal item, and it needs revision. 0.30 to 0.39 reasonably good item but possibly for improvement, and of course 0.40 and above a very good item. Since the item is very good, you don't have to improve it or you don't have to revise the test item. Okay, so this is now the discrimination index formula. Let me introduce. Actually, the index formula is was already described during the definition of discrimination index. Now, when we say discrimination index, discrimination or D sub I is equal to the answer or the number of the CUG minus CLG, where D sub I is the discrimination index value, and then the CUG would be the number of the students selecting the correct answer in the upper group. So letter C here is the correct answer, and then UG is the upper group, kung ilan yung nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper group. And then the CLG naman, kung ilan yung estudyante na nakapagpili or nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa lower group. So if that would be the case, meant to say we are to look for the difference between the two, no? And then letter D, the number of students in either the lower group or upper group. So paano kukunin yung letter D? Kung hindi equal yung number nila, I will just point it later during the example. Kung hindi equal yung number nila, you have to choose the higher one. Note, consider the higher number in case the sizes in upper and lower group are not equal. Anyway, I'll be showing you that later. Now, let's try to identify the steps in solving difficulty index and discrimination index. Okay, here are the steps. Number one, arrange the scores from highest to lowest. Let's run through everything because I'll be giving you example to this. Number two, I'll just read. Separate the scores into upper group and lower group. There are different methods to do this. If a class consists of 30 students who takes an exam, arrange their scores from highest to lowest, then divide them into two groups. The highest score belongs to the upper group, the lowest score belongs to the lower group. And letter B, other literature suggested to use 27%, 30%, or 30% of the students for the upper group and lower group. However, in the licensure examination for teachers, the test developers always use 27% of the students who participated in the examination for the lower and for the upper and lower groups. So ang gagawin, meron kang test paper, meron ka ng scores, you just have to arrange it from highest to lowest, and then you have to compute for the upper and lower. It's either 27% yung kukunin mo sa upper at saka lower, 30% yung kukunin mo sa upper at saka lower, and then the last one would be 33% sa upper and lower. Now, what's the purpose of the number? You don't have to analyze everything, so you just have to analyze 27% of the class of the upper, no? And then 27%, so kaya merong number. But sa LET, ang ginagamit is 27. Kaya, yung ginawa sa mga teachers, yung ginamit nila for the item analysis, the usual is 27%. So again, please read again number 2 for you to get how to get the upper, and of course you have to understand the concept of upper and lower group. Number 3, count the number of those who choose the alternatives. When we say alternatives, yung options in the upper and lower group for each item, and record the information using the template. So ang gagawin daw, pag nakakuha ka ng isa, count the number of those. For example, number 1, ilan yung nakasagot ng letter A sa upper at saka lower, ilan yung sumagot ng letter B sa upper at saka lower, ilan yung sumagot sa letter C, D, and E, and so on. And of course, do not forget to put asterisk for the correct answer, because the correct answer will be the highlight later. No? Bakit kailangan nating i-identify yung correct answer? You just have to put asterisk sa letter, no? Beside the letter. Number 4, compute the value of the difficulty index and discrimination index, and also the analysis of each response in the destructor. So this is now the time that you are gonna use your the formula. No, actually makukuha mo siya by that process lang. Number 5, make an analysis for each item. Okay. Checklist for discrimination index. This could actually help you. It is very important to determine whether the test item will be retained, revised, or rejected, because again, one of the purposes of your item analysis is to improve your test. That is why for us to improve our tests, we really have to identify the test that should be retained, revised, or rejected. Using the discrimination index, we can identify the non-performing question items. Just always remember that they seldom indicate what is the problem. Use the given checklist below. So if here are our 2 questions in a checklist, does the key discriminate positively? Meaning to say, is the answer really discriminate the upper and the lower? Because the main purpose of the discrimination index is to discriminate again the 2 groups. Okay. Number 2, do the incorrect options discriminate negatively? Okay. If yes or no. So meron tayong interpretation dyan if ang sagot natin is yes, and then if sagot natin is no. If the answers to questions 1 and 2 are both yes, you have to retain the item because that is a very good item. Number 2, if the answers to questions 1 and 2 are either yes or no, we have to revise the item. If the answers to questions 1 and 2 are both no, of course, we have to eliminate or reject the item. So this checklist could help you immediately if you are to retain, revise, or reject the item. Number 3, okay, another way to evaluate the performance of the entire test is through the analysis of the response options. So it is very important to examine the performance of each option in multiple choice test. Actually, yung highlight natin na example dito would be the multiple choice test because meron siyang question, meron din siyang alternative. So just very appropriate for item analysis. You can determine whether the destructors or incorrect options are effective or attractive to those who do not know the correct answer. Because ang purpose naman talaga natin sa mga distractors ay to distract really, no? And then to hide the correct answer. Next, the attractiveness of the incorrect options is determined when more students in the lower group than in the upper group choose it. So when can we say that the incorrect options are attractive? When there are a lot of students in the lower group answered the incorrect option compared to the upper group. Ang ibig sabihin, kailan nagiging attractive yung incorrect or yung maling sagot? No? Kailan magiging attractive na tinatawag? Magiging attractive yung tinatawag natin na maling sagot kung merong mas maraming nakakuha ng maling sagot, no? Sa coming from the lower group compared sa upper group. Next, analyzing the incorrect options allows the teachers to improve the test items so that it can be used again in the future. So we really have to analyze not just the correct answer, but also the incorrect options. So that is the analysis of response options. Next is we are to analyze our distractors because these are also important before we will proceed. Let me check before we will proceed to different examples. Yeah, malapit na tayo sa example. So destructor is the term used for the incorrect options in a multiple choice type of test where the correct answer represents the key. So again, ang destructor yun yung mga maling sagot or maling options, no? And then the correct answer is what we call the key. Using quantitative item analysis, we can determine if the options are good or if the destructors are effective. Item analysis can identify non-performing test items, but this item seldom indicates the error or the problem in the given item. There are factors to be considered why students failed to get the correct answer in the given question. Marami talaga, no? So dito yung mga rason, no? Number one, it is not taught in the class properly. So bakit students fail to get the correct answer because hindi siya masyadong tinuturo sa klase. Letter B, it is ambiguous, meaning to say the options are ambiguous, not very clear, no? Letter C, the correct answer is not in the given options, yung wala sa options yung tamang sagot, no? Letter D, it has more than one correct answer kung yung sagot nandun, no? Na doble. Like for example, letter A, apple. The correct answer is letter A, apple. Letter B, mango. Letter A, apple. So, din nagdoble, no? And then it contains grammatical clues to mislead the students. So we have grammatical clues, the aan. So we have to minimize that one. How to minimize? You have to reconstruct your questioning. And then the student is not aware of the content. Hindi talaga niya alam yung content. So hindi natin alam kung nasaan itong batang ito. And then the students were confused by the logic of the question because it has double negative. Siguro yung question, I couldn't never. I couldn't never. Couldn't is negative and then never is also negative at some point. So, hindi alam ng estudyante kung ano yung decision niya for this particular item. Okay? And then, the student failed to study the lesson. This is very evident. So, of course, hindi talaga nila makuha yung tamang sagot because they failed to study the lesson. Okay. Next, miskeyed item. So miskeyed items, the test item is a potential miskey if there are more students from the upper group who choose the incorrect options than the key. So again, miskeyed item kung potential miskey lang po ito, no? Potential miskey. So meron talagang mataas na chance na miskey talaga yung item if, paano natin malalaman kung yung nasa upper group mas pinili yung incorrect option kumpara sa tamang sagot. Okay? And then of course, guessing item, students from the upper Students from the upper group have equal spread of choices among the given alternatives. Students from the upper group guess their answers because of the following reasons. So bakit ba nag-guess yung estudyante na naman? Letter A, the content of the test is not discussed in the class or in the text. So hindi nasali siguro sa coverage, no? Kaya yun. Letter B, the test item is very difficult. Na mahiya tayong walang isagot, no? So that is why we have to guess in answering the test item. And then of course, letter C, the question is trivial. I think I did mention this during the development of test items that we do away with questions that are very tricky and very trivial, no? Dapat yung construction ng test item is kung ano dapat yung kailangan. Do not do some trivial techniques, no? And then number four, ambiguous item. This happens when more students from the upper group choose equally an incorrect option and the keyed answer. So, ibig sabihin, the same number yung sa upper group, no, the same number they choose sa upper group sa tamang sagot at saka sa incorrect options. Mean to say, naglibag yun kayo sila no kung unsa yun ang content sa question. Therefore, the question is very ambiguous. That's what we call ambiguous item. Okay. Next, let's try to look at the qualitative item analysis. Let's just run through. Qualitative item analysis, according to Zarowski RM, is a process in which the teacher or expert carefully proofreads the test before it is administered. To check if there are typographical errors, to avoid grammatical clues that may lead to giving away the correct answer, and to ensure that the level of reading materials is appropriate. These procedures can also include small group discussions on the quality of the examination and its item with examiners that have already took the test. According to Cohen, Swerdlick, and Smith, 1992, as cited by Zarowski, students who took the examination are asked to express verbally their experience in answering each item in the examination. This procedure can help the teacher in determining whether the test takers misunderstood a certain item, and it can help also in determining why they misunderstood a certain item. So those are the description or the characteristics of a qualitative item analysis. Now let's try to look at the different examples in answering how to improve our test items. How to improve, let's just have to follow the process for let's just have to follow the processes inside these examples. Item analysis enables the teachers to improve and enhance their skills in writing test items. Because why this could be an enhancement for teachers? Because this is a very challenging task for teachers. To improve multiple choice test items, we shall consider the stem of the item. The stem would be the question part. The destructors, which is the miskeyed options, no, hindi mga tamang mga sagot. Consider the test item, the system of the item, the destructors, and the key answer, of course. Let's try to look at the examples. I will not go through everything's examples. Let's just look one example for this, no, following the steps. For example, number one, a class is composed of first 40 students. Divide 40 students. Divide the group into two. Option B, so we have to divide the group into two now, no? The option B is the correct answer. Based on the given data on the table as a teacher, what would you do with the test item? So dito na natin malalaman kung ano ba talaga yung gagawin natin for this particular item based on the value presented sa table. Okay, we all know if we're going to total upper group, 3 plus 10 plus 4 plus 3, that is equivalent to 20, no? And then 4 plus 4 plus 8 plus 4, that is also equivalent to 20 because 20 plus 20 would be 40 students. 40 students kasi yung nakuha ko. no, na example. Okay. Next, as the first one, we have to compute the difficulty index. So how to compute? Of course, we have to get the small letter n first. Yung sinabing small letter n, meaning to say, kung ilan yung nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper at saka lower. So 10 plus 4, the correct answer for small letter n is 14. And then the capital letter is 40. Yes, no, because that would be the number of students who will take the exam. So 40 natin yan. And then we have to use the formula D sub F is equal to small letter n over n. Okay, we have to use that one. And then substitute, and then voila, your answer is 0.35 or 35%. Now, so right after getting the result, you have to go back to the interpretation kung ano yung 0.35 or 35%. Okay. Right after computing the difficulty index, we have to compute now the discrimination index. So we have, of course, CUG is equal to 10. Okay. And then, so nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper and then nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa lower, apat. So we have here our D is equal to 20. Sir, bakit 20 lang? Okay. Di ba? It's the number of either upper group at saka lower group. So kinwenta natin kanina na yung upper group lahat 20 and then lower group lahat would be 20. Therefore, letter D, the capital letter D is equal to 20. Now substitute and you will get 0.30 or 30%. And then you have to check sa interpretation sa discrimination index. Do not interpret it with basing on the difficulty index, ma'am. Check. Ito yung lahi, okay? So, sa difficulty index na to, we have to really check no the value because in checking the value and then in checking balik-balik sa percentage, that's it. And then we have to use, of course, our table for us to check kung ano yung interpretation. Because remember, the interpretation part is very important. Because, of course, the interpretation will be your feedback on how to deal with that particular item. So check the value of your DF and then check the value of your DI. And then right after that, get now the interpretation of that value by checking it on the table presented. So, yun yung table natin na gagamitin. Then, right after that, now we have to analyze, no? We have to give analysis sa ato ang answer. So, for letter A, ang analysis niya, only 35% of the examinees got the answer correctly, hence the item is difficult. So, dili na dayon. And then, more students from the upper group got the correct answer correctly, hence it has a positive discrimination. Tama, di ba? Kasi nga, mas marami nakakuha ng tamang sagot sa upper group. That is 10. Okay? Compared to 4. Therefore, that is what we call positive discrimination. Letter C, retain options A, C, and E because most of the students who did not perform well in the overall examination selected it. Those options attract most students from the lower group. Kung titingnan naman natin yung examples natin, meron talagang kumukuha ng mga sa options A, C, and E. Therefore, we have to retain it. You don't have to revise it. So those options attract most students from the lower group. Okay. Next, as a conclusion for example number 1, retain the test item. No, we have to retain the test item. We don't have to change it, but we have to change option D. Make it more realistic to make it effective for the upper and lower groups. At least 5% of the examinees choose the incorrect option para masabi nating okay na yung destructor. Now, if you are going to look at letter D, 0 yan. No? Naka-0 na siya. So, wala talagang kumuha for particular D. Siguro, the other chance, that is why, kung ang tamang sagot or yung options natin or ang tamang sagot for that particular question is a color, therefore, dapat lahat ng options ay kulay. No? Like for example, the answer of that particular question is color red, and then you have the option letter A, letter A blue, letter B red, which is the correct answer, letter C pink, letter D apple. O, di ba, layo kayo siya. So that is why, alam kasi ni ng mga estudyante na kulay yung sagot, so wala pipili for the letter D. Okay? So that makes it zero. So we will have to look for our what you call this, our options well, no? Titingnan talaga natin kung ano yung dapat gamitin. Okay? So that is for the examples, children. And you have to look for the other examples para naman ano ba? You are para naman you will be accustomed with this particular matter. So try to look at the examples, and then of course, if right after scanning this presentation and listening and watching this presentation, you are now to proceed your tasks. Okay? If you have questions, please do not hesitate to message me sa ato ang GC or send me a private message through Messenger or what you call this to my numbers. Okay? Thank you so much and have a nice day ahead. Keep safe, everyone.